Hello and welcome. His adventures have taken him sky high, literally, as he brushed with death as an aerobatic hang gliding champion. He made a name for himself circumnavigating the globe in a hot air balloon and continues to find ways to challenge the elements. This week on One on One, meet the talented scientist, psychiatrist and adventurer, Bertrand Piccard. It was in his blood from an early age. Bertrand Piccard's family were adventurers and explorers, and successful ones at that. His grandfather developed the pressurized cabin, allowing him to explore the stratosphere. Bertrand's father then used the same principle to explore the depths of the sea. Before long, young Bertrand was flying hang gliders and microlights, becoming an aerobatic champion. His fame, however, came when he joined co-pilot Brian Jones to take their balloon, the Breitling Orbiter, non-stop around the world in 1999, in what was described as one of the last great adventures of the 20th century. However, Dr. Piccard has used his fame and medical skills to help others, both as a UN Goodwill Ambassador and with his own charity, Winds of Hope, founded with his former co-pilot Brian Jones. The adventure never stops for Dr. Bertrand Piccard, and he's already set his sights on environmentally friendly, solar-powered flights. Bertrand, great to speak with you again. A pleasure. I have to ask you, how you define yourself. You do so much stuff. And I've read this expression, le savanturier. Yeah, it's like a combination of savant, the French word for scientist, and aventurier, like adventurer. So you're like a scientist adventurer. Is that accurate?
Yes, in the sense that my main interest is to explore life, explore human being, explore the potential that we can develop and fulfill in life. And for me, curiosity is much more important than anything else. Try to go and see beyond the obvious, beyond the borders.
And of course, you've broken so many records, aviation records, for example. Are there any left to break?
Yes, breaking records, it's fun, but it's not the main thing. When I flew around the world with Brian Jones in the Orbiter 3, the goal was not just to break records. The goal was like to write a new page of history of aviation in being the first to do it. And when you are the first to do something, you have no idea if it's possible or not. You have to invent the solutions, you have to invent the answers, you have to build up the team that can do it. And that's why it's so interesting. When you break records, you just try to improve what others have done. It's not enough. I like to open new doors, and I think probably that comes from the experience I had with my father and grandfather.
I'm going to get onto those in a moment, but I want to ask you about one of your latest projects, the Solar Impulse, the solar-powered one-seated glider, which is dubbed a great human adventure. Why in particular that?
Well, Solar Impulse is a symbol. The goal is to fly around the world with an airplane with solar power in order to use no fuel and to make zero polluting emissions. It's zero carbon footprint. And I think it's really important because what happens in this plane? You have to take off on solar power, load the batteries during the day, spend the night in the air on the energy of the batteries, and you have to reach the next sunrise before the batteries are empty. Otherwise you crash. And if you get long enough in the air and you reach the next sunrise, you can make the next day, load the batteries again, the next night, the next day, and so on. And it's, I think, a really nice symbol of what we have to do in our world if we want to give the planet to the next generation and then to the next generation again. We need now new technologies. We need new sources of energy. We need to be energy efficient. That's the way we can solve the problems now, because it's clear that we cannot follow what the green parties are saying. Let's go backwards. Let's go to the cave age, renounce to cars, renounce to comfort and so on, to save energy and protect nature.
So it has to be workable, doesn't it?
This doesn't work. People want to keep their lifestyle, their comfort, their mobility, and you have to allow them to do it, but with new technologies that can prevent humankind to have such a bad impact on nature. So this is really the type of message we want to give through this type of project.
Your grandfather Auguste and your father Jacques were both big adventurers, and I guess it was almost natural for you to follow that line, yeah?
Absolutely. I've seen that in my childhood as something normal. I thought all the parents were doing that. My grandfather actually was the first man to see with his own eyes the curvature of the Earth from his stratospheric balloon when he invented the pressurized capsule to go so high. And then my father reached the bottom of the ocean, 11,000 meters deep, in the Marianas Trench with the bathyscaphe he had built with his own father. So when I was going, for example, at the cinema to see 20,000 Leagues Under Water, when it came out, I was 7 years old, and I was looking at that film, and I said, well, I have my Captain Nemo at home, and he's next to me now in the cinema. It's my father. So of course, it's a real great incentive to try also to do something special or something interesting, to go beyond the borders of what people believe is the limits for human beings. No, we have to open new doors, explore new horizons, invent. This is what makes life interesting.
And your grandfather actually kept great company, people like Albert Einstein and Marie Curie.
Absolutely.
You know, top names. Sadly, you're only about 4 or 5 years old when he died. How well did you get to know him in that time?
I knew him as a child. That means I keep memories of impressions, memories of moments, absolutely no memories of discussions. But my father has such a big admiration for his own father that I could learn everything from him, and all the stories, all the anecdotes of what he has done. He is known for the bathyscaphe and the stratospheric balloon, but he is the one who discovered uranium-235, and at that time he called it actinuran, and he made the most precise scale, the most precise seismograph. So it's really a real scientist in the global sense of the word.
And recorded in history as the figure who Hergé, the Belgian cartoonist, was inspired to create Professor Calculus on.
Exactly, exactly.
Right, so every time you open a Tintin book, there you have some memory, I guess, of your grandfather.
Yes, and you know, one day one of my children told me, Daddy, you shouldn't be sad that your grandfather died, because you can see him whenever you want in a Tintin cartoon.
What about you? I mean, how much did that pioneering family history, of course, and your father and his exploits, how much pressure did that put on you to succeed and do new things?
I think I put the pressure myself on me, because the people I met when I was a child were not only my grandfather, my father, they were also the astronauts going to the moon, divers, explorers that were friends of my father, just coming for lunch or dinner at home. And then when I was looking at these people, I always thought, and I remember very well when I had these thoughts, I want to do the same type of things, I want to have the same type of life. So of course, when you're a teenager, it's easy. You believe that life is open and you can do everything. Then when you have to choose which study you do, which activities you do, which job you do, it starts to become narrow. And it starts to become difficult, because you say, wow, I want to be an explorer. Okay, but explorer of what? And it started in a very interesting moment, because everybody talks of my father and grandfather, but fortunately I also had a mother.
Yeah.
And she's the one who raised my interest in psychology, philosophy, spirituality, studying different religion to try to understand also how other people could think in another way. And that gave me the wish to become a psychiatrist, medical doctor, specialized to try to understand not only what makes people sick, but what can make people fulfilled, successful, happy in life, and study the behaviors of the people, and also maybe understand that we have a lack of spiritual roots, at least in the Western world. This is why I admire very much the Eastern world and the Arabic world. There is much more spiritual roots. People can speak of God and can speak of praying, and they can pray together. In the Western world, it's left aside, and I think it's a pity. And I've always been interested by that. Study let's say, why is human being living on this planet? What do we have to achieve? Where do we come from? Where do we go? So I became a medical doctor, psychiatrist. I opened a medical practice, but at the same time I kept, of course, my interest for exploring the outer world, not only the inner world. And I became a hang glider pilot, mainly for aerobatic. I did some competition.
You're a champion, European champion for a while, I think.
Yes, I was European champion for aerobatic with hang gliding. And then I switched to ballooning. And each time, you know, I had these 2 feet, one in the psychology and philosophy, and one in the action of explorating. And the balloon flight around the world finally was, of course, people see it as an action. But for me, it was a deep reflection also on how life can be compared to a balloon flight.
And presumably it was an active and I would guess, a happy lifestyle in Lausanne, in Switzerland, where you were born.
Yes.
And I know that you're very active with your own family. You have 3 daughters. They all have scuba licenses too. With your wife, you're all diving. So you're in the air and in the water with your family as well. How much do you see that spirit of adventure in your daughters?
I don't know yet what they are going to do. But what I try to help them is how to do what they would like to do. How to introduce curiosity, how to introduce perseverance, how to introduce respect in everything they do. They can be mothers at home, they can be engineers, they can be explorers, they can do anything they want. But they have to do it in an open-minded way. They need to be interested about what other people think, what other people do, why is life so important on this planet. And I believe that the next challenges of exploration will not be so much to conquer other territories, mountains, South Pole or North Pole, because everything has been conquered. Now I think the challenge for the 21st century is to improve the quality of life. For this we need good governance on the planet. We need to eradicate poverty, and we need to reach sustainable development also through industry, through energy supply and so on. And here there is so much space for people who are innovative.
How does your wife Michelle cope with what are very potentially dangerous trips you do? You're circumnavigating the world in a balloon and so on. She seems fairly laid back. I met her, but it must be a bit of stress for her to see you go off on these expeditions.
She has a very nice answer. I'm sorry she's not here to tell it herself, but I will repeat it. She said, I married a pilot and an explorer, someone who loves to explore life. If now I would ask him not to do it anymore, he would not be the man that I fell in love with.
I'm going to ask you to pause for just a moment. We're going to take a short break here. We're back with more with Bertrand Piccard in just a moment.